Hi, this is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee, and for today's video, this is the first installment of or rather the first official installment of the TID radio TD-H3 operator series. Now, the operator series videos that I don't do them on all of the radios that I review, but when I get certain radios that attract a certain level of interest and I'm getting a lot of questions, and there's a lot of activity around the radio, sometimes I'll elect to take a little deeper dive into the radio to help those people that already own the radio learn to operate the radios a little bit better. Again, we're not doing a review here, and I'm not really going to be trying to introduce the radio to a new audience. Instead, I'm talking to the people that have already made the purchase and own the radio, and now they want to learn how to make it work. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing that. Well, when you're setting up your radio utilizing either a factory CPS system or Chirp or OD Master, that's a good, quick, effective way to set up your radio, and it's a pretty efficient way of doing it. I do it myself. There's nothing wrong with that. But having the ability to do a lot of that in the absence of a computer is an important skill to have, particularly if you're going to be using this radio out in the outdoors, for instance, away from computers where you're not going to be able to hook this thing up to make a change on the radio. Knowing how to do that from the front panel is a pretty good skill, like I said, to have. So that's what we'll be doing here, is digging into the features of the radio, and we're going to be working a lot with the menu on how to set certain things up and make certain things, enable certain things, disable certain things, add and delete channels from scan. I'm going to show you how to set up simplex and repeater channels and add them to a memory slot. And I'll be going over some of the quirks of the radio as well that I've identified up to this point. But usually in this first installment, what I like to do is take a deep dive into the radio, particularly starting with the display, so that you know where to look for certain things that you're going to want to make a change on or affect or adjust. So looking at the display, of course, we have our black background display with most of the relevant lettering is in white, and you have some colors for accent here and there, but I'm going to kind of try to explain why or what some of these icons mean. So first thing you're going to notice at the very top, we have a signal strength indicator. This is your transmit signal strength indicator. In most cases, when you transmit, that red bar is going to go all the way to 5. Now in this radio, that's actually accurate. It does 4.7 to 5 watts usually on VHF and around 6 on UHF. So transmit power is actually pretty good, so that's relatively accurate. I think on the H8 it's a little less accurate. It's showing full 10 every time, and it's not. But below that, all the way to the left, we have this little, looks like a champagne glass, but that's actually an antenna strength indicator. So that's supposed to allegedly show you the strength of the incoming signal, and you'll get little 3 bars when the transmission is coming through. The accuracy on that is dubious at best. I don't rely on it or use it ever. Now immediately to the right of that, you'll see an H. Now the H, that's your current power setting for the affected channel that you're looking at. Now before I get to that, let me talk about that affected channel term. Now if you look to the very bottom, you'll see 2 lines of data here, TCRC1 and TCRC-G1. So that's a ham and a GMRS repeater. And you'll see that green arrow. That green arrow is telling you this information right here relates to the highlighted memory line there. So if I were to change that by pressing the AB button in the bottom right hand corner, it'll move that arrow down, and now we're looking at a completely different repeater and the relevant data related to that, including the memory slot, the frequency, etc. So let's go back to that original one again. So in this case, it tells us this particular selection is set for high power. Now this is very important with the TD-H3, because I'm getting a lot of people that are jumping onto Facebook user groups and are saying, hey, I can hit a repeater with my H8, but I'm not hitting it at all with my H3. I'm having problems. I'm seeing that over and over and over again. And oftentimes what it comes up to is when they look at that, they see an L instead of an H. Now, if you see an L, that means you're low power. And if you're low power, you're transmitting down around a half watt to a watt. Of course, you're not going to be hitting the repeater because you're not using the full output power of the radio. So that's a very important point of information there, is current power setting. Now what's causing this is apparently there's a bug or a problem with chirp, and when people are reading their radio to or reading the data from their computer to their radio, chirp is automatically making everything low power all the way across the board. I have seen this myself. Now I actually had it happen on a firmware update. When I did the firmware update, when I fired the radio back up, everything across the board from beginning to end was set to low power. It actually did not relate to chirp. I had some people say that was the issue. I didn't really discover that until I hooked it up after that to chirp, and because I was going through and manually changing the power setting across. Now I have 192 channels on this radio right now, and adjusting the power settings on every single channel manually starts wearing your thumb out after a bit. So I hooked it up to chirp, and I went in there and I changed everything in the column for power setting to high power, read it to the radio, and it changed even though I had done about half of them already manually, it changed everything back to low power again, which is infuriating. I don't know what the fix is with that. I don't know if it's with the radio or with chirp. Because I've had it happen with chirp, and I've had it happen with something related to the radio that wasn't related to chirp, and that was off the firmware update. So that tells me it's not chirp. It tells me it's the radio or some way that the data is being passed. I'm sure they'll work it out. I don't want to start another controversy with that, but it will say if you're having trouble hitting a repeater, look at that power output right there and make sure that you're set on high. I'll show you how to change that in just a little bit. Now immediately to the right of that you see a W. You're going to have two options here. Just as with the power you have high or low. With this particular setting you have wide or narrow. This is going to be your bandwidth setting for this affected channel. Now I'll show you an N here popping up if I go to channel 11, for instance. So this is going to be channel 8 through 14 is in the GMRS world is your interstitial FRS stuff. So this is your 0.5 watt narrow band output, and this radio is locked into that. So when you switch to that, it's going to be narrow band because that's what's called for that particular frequency. Wide or narrow, I get that question a lot. Do I use wide band or narrow band? I only use narrow band when I'm directed to use narrow band. So for instance, if it's FRS or something. Other than that, I use wideband for everything. Now in the world of GMRS, you only use narrow for those interstitial channels 8 through 14. Everything else is wideband, repeaters and simplex. In the ham world, I've never encountered narrow band even once anywhere that it was called for in a repeater or anything like that. So, but it is something to note. Now let's go back here so we get everything where we want it. Okay, moving down. Below that you have your frequency, and again this is your relevant channel, so or relevant memory slot. So in this case we're looking at the arrow is on TCRC1. That tells me the transmit frequency for this repeater is 146.880. Now if I wanted to know what the I'm sorry, did I say transmit? Receive frequency. My bad. So the receive frequency for this repeater is 146.880, and it's always, with repeaters, it's always going to show the receive frequency, and with simplex, the receive and transmit frequencies are the same. Now, of course, with a repeater, your transmit frequency is going to be different. So if you want to know what that is, this radio does have one cool feature that does that. So if you watch when I key down, watch for this change right here to occur. So it's currently showing 146.880. When I press the PTT, it should show 146.280. So let's go ahead and do that. And you can see right there. So what that is doing is when you're activating the PTT, it's showing your transmit frequency. Oh, we got incoming helos. I hope you are not picking that up on the microphone, but yeah, I got a helicopter just flew over my house. Okay, so we got 146.880 is received. Transmit 146.280 tells me I have an offset of minus 0.6, which is pretty common for a VHF ham repeater. Now, if I switch down to GMRS world here, when I transmit here, what I'm going to see is a change from 462.700 to 467.700. So let's see what happens. And there you go. And that's because GMRS is +5. So it's +5 megahertz offset, and that's that necessary offset when you're operating a repeater. You always have a different frequency for transmit and receive. Simplex, same. So let's go back here. Okay, moving down below the actual displayed frequency, we have our channel slot. Now, our channel slot is the actual memory slot that this particular repeater resides on. We know that's channel 137. And without even having to look, I can tell you when I switch down to TCRC G1, it's going to be 039. So there we are, 039. That's the memory slot there. Now, how do I know it's 039? Because I've been reminded enough times right there, and that's helpful. For instance, you saw me do it a little earlier when I was, I think it was on 11. Yeah, let's go to channel 11. If I needed to go back to that repeater again, I know channel 039 is going to get me there. So that's good information to know. Okay, so now moving to the right of that, you see these little circling arrows. Now what these circling arrows are telling you is that this radio is currently set up in dual watch mode. It's just letting you know that it's going to be watching for incoming message traffic on either of these lines right here. There is another mode you can set this up where that will go away, and then you'll know that that's not currently set up. The S right here, what the S is, and a lot of people wondered on this one, that's your power save mode. So if you go into, I believe it's 3, so it's currently set up 4, I guess, or I don't really, is that 1 to 4? Okay, let's select that and let's just go to off and make our selection exit. Now the S is gone. The factory default setting is that so I don't really know how to actually express that. Is it 1 to 4? Is it 1 to 2? It's almost like an SWR reading, but I know that is the factory setting, so I'm going to leave it there because I don't really know much beyond that on what that's going to affect if I turn that off or on. I know it's meant to conserve power under certain circumstances, so I don't know if it's going to eat the battery up more or not. I would say leave it and don't mess with it and don't worry about the S. So now we move down to the lower portion of the display. And here we're going to see some stuff that is showing but not relevant and not accurate and therefore not useful. So you have your two lines, A and B. You'll see the CT showing up right here. Now what this tells me, or what this should tell me for every repeater that's activated or that's showing right here, is it shows either CT or DCS. And that tells you the type of tone, whether it's DCS or CT-CSS. That's all that's telling you. But this is not an accurate gauge right here because it's showing for this repeater CT. So it tells me CT-CSS. Now I'm going to move up and it's going to go to off. Now this repeater right here, TCRC2, is most definitely set up with CT-CSS tone. What does the off mean? Now I can tell you I sort of figured this out, but it still doesn't make any sense. So TCRC1, the way this repeater is set up is it has CT-CSS applied to both the transmit and receive frequencies. So on transmit and receive, it's both sending a tone of 103.5 and it's only opening squelch for incoming traffic that has a CT-CSS tone of 103.5. The reason for that is there's a distant repeater that sometimes bleeds over into this repeater. So they set it up as what's called tone squelch, which is CT-CSS on send and receive, which is the same thing that's applied to GMRS because they only have the 8 repeater slots. So they use CT-CSS on both send and receive on pretty much everything. But in the ham world, most of the time, it's just a CT-CSS tone on transmit only to open the repeater. So as I cycle through here, I go to this repeater and it only has a CT-CSS or PL tone of 103.5 applied to transmit. There's nothing on receive. So it's showing off. Now, let me see if this changes, because this data changes up here when I transmit. For instance, when I transmit, this is going to change to 445.400. Maybe when I transmit, this might change from off to CT. Let's see what happens. Okay, so the display is only giving the information that's effective in the moment based on how the radio is operating. So right here, it's showing that on the receive frequency, 440.400, there's no CT-CSS applied on receive. But on transmit, when it switches to 445.400, there is. Shows CT there. So that sort of explains it, but this isn't particularly useful in my estimation. Now, let's try another little experiment. Let's move down to the B line here and see what happens. Now, the B line, 462.700, I can tell you for certain that this has CT CSS applied 103.5 to send and receive. So we got CT showing, okay? Let's see what happens when I transmit and see if that stays at CT. Certainly does. And we move all the way up. So it doesn't drop the CT down lower to that line, but it definitely tells you that. So I guess you could say it's accurate. It's just you need to know what you're looking at in the moment. So if you see that off there, that explains what the off means, because I have had some people actually ask that question. So let's go back to here. Very good. Okay, so that's, one last thing on the display is going to be our battery strength meter. Nowhere on this radio is the ability to set up a digital readout of the current DC voltage on the battery, and that is a big deficiency with this radio that I don't like. I can't stand it. It's top of the list for the list of suggestions that I'm going to have for TID radio for their next radio. I'm keeping sort of a running tally. Excuse me. So yeah, having really your only indicator is what your battery strength is going to be the 3 bars shown on the battery meter. It's so accurate, I guess. But I would prefer more of a digital readout, so I know, look, if it's showing 2 bars and I'm only getting 7.4 off the battery, I should be charging that already. It shouldn't be getting any lower than that. So I would definitely like to see something a little more positive there. So that's kind of it for the display. That's the information that we have to look at. Now there's going to be more stuff that comes up once we start working with this blue button. And right now we're going to move down to the actual keys on the front panel. And I should tell you, this episode 1 of these operator series runs kind of long because we have a lot of info to go over. Following this, they're all fairly short because we're just going after one task at a time. So they should all be a bit shorter after this, so please bear with me. So the first and most important button on this panel that we're going to run into is going to be this blue button. Now what the blue button allows you to do, and it's followed in order of priority by the orange button, by the way, but the blue button, a short press of the blue button allows you to enter into the actual menu mode. Now from the menu mode, you use your up-down arrow keys that are used for channel navigation, are also used for memory item navigation. And it's a real simple system in that you navigate through until you find the option that you want to mess with. So in this case, we'll, let's see, let's go ahead and do something that's actually going to make some noise. Let's find beep. So let's see. Navigate through to doop, 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 doop. Well, I picked a stupid thing to focus on, didn't I? Okay, beep. Item number 6, I should have known that. So let's say when we turn the radio on initially, and this will happen, it's making a heck of a lot of noise. You got a voice that's talking to you, you got a radio that's beeping, and you want to get rid of that beeping noise. This is going to drop out. Yeah, there you go. So press that again if you drop out of the menu. So if I want to turn that beep on or off, so I navigate to menu item 6, and I just press the menu button again, and kind of give you an idea what this is. So the green arrow tells me this is the menu item we've navigated to. When I press that again, these are our selections that we can now choose from. And in this case, it's going to be on or off. So let's go ahead and turn it on, and I press the menu button again to select that. And then from there, I press the orange button to exit. And now it's making a little beeping sound for me. Let's say I don't like that beep sound, so I press that again, and I press the menu button one more time to select that item. I go to off, press the menu again, and I press the exit button. And now, no noise. So it killed that. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how you, in the most basic sense, actually run the menu. And it's super simple. And just knowing that little nugget of information is actually going to help you quite a lot moving forward. So moving to the right, you'll notice a number of different keys here have both the number and also a shortcut function. And what these are for is to get you to that menu item a little bit quicker. So you press the menu button, and let's say I want to go to power, I press 2. Now, if it's not bad if you're going into the menu and you're already on item 0, going to 2 is nothing. But let's say you're on item 52 and you want to go to 2. That makes it a whole lot faster being able to jet around like that. So I can go to 6, and that actually gives me, yeah, okay. 3 is going to be power save. Then we got steps. So yeah, we've got a bunch of different little things that we can do here. You can also actually punch in, let's say 4-2, and you can actually punch if you know the actual menu number. So let's go to 3-9. You can actually punch that in just like you can with a frequency when you're in memory mode. So let's exit out of that. Now, you have a couple of other buttons here that have long functions that you access without being in the memory. For instance, scan is one of those. So to start scan on this radio is button number 3, and this is a long press. So you go 1001, 1002, and release, and we start to scan. And something I'll point out is if you want to change the direction of the scan, you can do that by using the arrow key, and you can just roll up and down. Just by pressing those directions, you can either ascend or descend. Now to exit scan, there's 2 different ways to do that. You can long press 3 again. Let's start scan. The quickest way out, hit the exit button, the orange button, and that'll stop your scan right there. So let's go ahead and get out of that real quick. See if I can get back in. And sometimes I'll use scan to actually rocket through the yeah, there we are. Okay. Now, what else do we have to look at here? We have our A/B button. We already talked about that. We talked about our wide narrow here. There's actually the shortcut key for that. So that's kind of it relative to the front panel. And that's the first step into deep diving is get in there and kind of mess around and see what you got. Following, as I mentioned earlier, videos that follow this are going to be much shorter, and they're all going to be topically driven. So you're going to go from this video, which is pretty broad-based and generalized. We're going to be narrowing that down into carrying out very specific functions, and then we'll be talking about videos that will range from 3 to 5 minutes. So it'll be much quicker past this point. And that's kind of all I want to talk about today in terms of this introduction. The next one up, we're going to go through the menu functions to show you kind of how to, in the most basic sense, set your radio up. I'm going to do a factory reset on this radio, and we're going to start basically like it comes out of the package. And then from there, I'm going to show you how to turn the beeps off and play with the display and all that, and set up the backlight times and whatnot, and show you the first basic steps to setting the radio up, and then we'll work there through all of the different functions of setting up the memory channels and whatnot. But I will at this point go ahead and bring it to a close, and we'll cover those topics as they come up. So with that, I thank you for watching and or listening. This is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee from Visalia, California. Have a wonderful day.